I'm very thankful that I've been invited to share a few thoughts today, along with my esteemed colleagues, Marianne, Fritz, Scott, and Kevin. This year concludes my 37th at AU as a professor of music and my 44th year as a teacher. My first beginning in 1977 as the choir director at Hagerstown Junior Senior High School here in Indiana. I taught part-time at three other colleges and universities, but Anderson College/University was my alpha and omega for full-time university teaching. As I have been reflecting on my years here at AU, my heart is filled with gratitude for so many wonderful colleagues, experiences, opportunities, and of course, the students. For my time today, I want to share a few of my memories, experiences that I hold dear to my heart, and some hopes for the future. During my time at AU, I have taught beginning conducting, advanced choral conducting and choral literature on the graduate level, secondary choral methods, choral arranging, and voice classes. I have maintained a private studio most of those years, except for about 6 of the 15 years that I was the conductor of the Anderson University Chamber Orchestra. I've been the director and conductor of the women's chorus, the male chorus, a men's choir we call the Valley Voices, Anderson Symphonic Choir for 35 years, a chamber choir from the symphonic choir for a few years. Fritz was in that. And I conducted our concerto aria orchestra for 34 years. I've conducted the AC choir/AU chorale for 37 years and have the distinction of the only one who has served as the director when the choir was actually called the AC choir and the AU chorale. Dr. Robert Nicholson was the president of Anderson College when I was hired in 1984. Prior to being president, Dr. Nicholson was the dean of the college for many years and was a music professor for several years long before that. And he founded the AC choir in 1945. Having been raised Lutheran, I found it a small miracle, maybe not small, that I made it through the interview process with Nick and then Dean Barry Callan. When I was first offered the position, it did not include being the conductor of the AC choir, now called the chorale. I told them that AC was my first choice, but that I had just been offered that day, sort of a signpost for me maybe, that I'd been offered a position of the Associate Director of Choirs at Michigan State University. And I wanted a few days to decide what I was going to do. Well, the next day, Barry Callan called and said that they had reconsidered their offer and decided to include the AC choir in the chorale. So I accepted and have been here ever since. Dale Bankson was the department chair and the dean at that time. During my years as the conductor of the chorale, we have toured here in the US for most of those 37 years, visiting almost every state, as you mentioned. Some larger cities in which we have sung concerts include New York, Boston, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Savannah, Atlanta, Huntsville, Orlando, Miami, Tampa, Lake Wales, New Orleans, Jackson, Meridian, Little Rock, Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, St. Louis, Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Fargo, Omaha, Lincoln, Kearney, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Dallas, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and San Diego. With about 9 tour sites for each spring break tour, there were hundreds of smaller churches where we sang, especially in Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Michigan. During many of those tours, we visited schools and sang for their students and with them as part of our recruiting strategy. While many of the churches in which we gave our concerts were Church of God, we branched out into many other denominations, sharing the Anderson University story with new audiences and potential friends. We sang at several conferences of the American Choral Directors Association, including a national conference in Phoenix, where we were only one of 4 university choirs to be chosen to do so through a blind audition. We've sung at many music education conferences and other invitational events. And for about 16 years, we were a major part of the Praise Gathering for Believers held in Indianapolis, hosted by Bill and Gloria Gaither. And one summer, we were chosen to represent the state of Indiana singing for Indiana Day at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. In addition to the domestic tours, we have had the wonderful experience of performing many major choral orchestral works, too many to mention here, with several Indiana orchestras, including the Anderson Symphony Orchestra, of which I've been the music director for 32 years. And by the way, after my retirement from Anderson University and my wife and I moving to the Chicago area to be close to 2 of our kids and a bunch of grandchildren, I'm going to keep the job as the music director of Anderson Symphony, and I'll be traveling back a few times a year for that. Those performances that we had with the orchestras have included several remarkable concerts in the Palladium in Carmel. But perhaps the greatest touring experiences have been we actually have done 12 European tours beginning in 1986 as part of the Tri-S program that have taken us to Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, and Russia, which was, when we first went, was still the Soviet Union. The students and I have memories of those tours, several of which lasted 21 days, that could absolutely fill a book. We sang in churches built in the 11th century, to churches and concert halls designed with the most modern of Scandinavian Nordic architecture. I recall a concert in the very beautiful and modern Karelia Hall in Joensuu, that after our last number, the audience was, as they do over there, clapping in rhythm, and then they were shouting, Danny boy, in a thick Finnish accent, requesting that we repeat one of the songs we had already performed in the concert as an encore. Lawrence Brownlee was the soloist. Touring is among the most valuable experiences we have had at this institution, like many other institutions of our kind. I did not attend a church-related school like AU. I went to IU, Colorado State, and Arizona State. For 3 years, I sat in the second bass section of the concert choir at Arizona State, where I was working on my doctorate, right next to a guy named Eric Christiansen. His grandfather, F. Milius Christiansen, was the founder of the St. Olaf Choir, and his father, Paul, was the director of the Concordia College Choir. Now, being Lutheran, I had always, known some of these things and some of the traditions from the Lutheran schools, but I learned so much from Eric. I just picked his brain all the time about the world of choir touring and how beneficial, and I learned how beneficial it was for students in the institutions. The fact that Anderson had a strong touring tradition figured heavily into my decision to choose Anderson to spend my life's work. There are so many things to be learned from touring. Repeating a concert many times and the musical and spiritual growth that comes from familiarity with that program, singing for a new audience each night, insights gained from students in our pre-concert devotions, which, by the way, were among the most profound learning times for me. Having to stay healthy, making good choices for the group above your own personal needs, being cooperative, fulfilling your committee assignments. Everybody has at least one job to do, like being on the riser crew or the luggage crew and so on and so forth. The building of friendships. Over the years I've been here, I've seen a lot of folks who met each other in Corral who are married now. And, but we have built many friendships, being supportive of each other spiritually and emotionally, learning, memorizing, performing a program of diverse music in several languages, and how to become a storyteller to the audience. Having fun staying in host homes and hotels. Many have built lifelong friendships from these experiences. And as I mentioned earlier, touring is a way to introduce or enhance the relationships we have with the church and beyond. As you can imagine, from my viewpoint as a professor, there were many teachable opportunities on tour. As an undergraduate at IU, I was a double major in voice performance and music education. From my high school days through graduate school and beyond, I had many experiences as a singer in musicals, operettas, operas, and oratorios, including a few professional gigs. I know that world well, and I know about all the things that go into musical and theatrical performances. There are things without which those art forms cannot exist. They are good and necessary. But for me, choral music is very special and a wondrous art form on its own. In the AU Chorale and many other groups like them, they sing without makeup, costumes, sets, lights, choreography, microphones, and sound systems, all that stuff. Our uniforms are supposed to be boring. We want the audience not to notice what we are wearing. It's all about the music, the texts, the stories, the sound, without all that other stuff. We walk out onto a stage and we make art, just us. Sometimes with instruments, but often in its purest form, unaccompanied. A lesson to be taught and often learned by many is that to be successful in a choir, it's not about you. You are a part of an experience that is bigger than yourself. And in the words of John A. Morrison, first president of Anderson University, life is saved only by dedication to something larger than itself. The purpose of life is to spend it for something that will outlast it. I believe that the choral experience at Anderson University has been for many years that way before I came on the scene, very much aligned with our institutional goals. And it's been my hope that during my tenure, we also have supported that part of our institutional mission. I'm grateful for all the blessings I've described above. And I'm grateful that the chorale and our voice area will be under the leadership next year of a full-time faculty member without whom it would be very difficult to sustain these programs. And I'm grateful that Theo Hicks will be our new faculty member to carry on these traditions. Music, and perhaps more specifically choral and vocal music, is part of the DNA of this institution. It has been there since the beginning. And we have a proud and distinguished history in all the arts. I believe that the arts are essential to keeping Anderson University as a strong, vibrant, relevant, and distinctive university. In an interview with John Gruen of the Los Angeles Times in December 1972, Leonard Bernstein said, "The point is, art never stopped a war and never got anybody a job. That was never its function. Art cannot change events, but it can change people. It can affect people so that they are changed because people are changed by art, enriched, ennobled, encouraged, and then they act in a way that may affect the course of events by the way they vote, they behave, the way they think. It has been my distinct joy and privilege to have been the caretaker for the chorale for the past 37 years and to have taught all the many students entrusted to my care. I deeply believe in the power and the value of the arts here at AU to change lives and to educate for a life of faith and service in the church and society. Thank you very much.